In our facility audit project, we're going to be looking at a lot of different standards and guidelines for sport facilities. And a lot of these standards and guidelines will be in different areas such as ADA, or Americans with Disabilities Act. They may address how specific equipment works or is safe. They may even address things like how chemicals are stored in storage areas in the pool, for example. So there's going to be lots of different types of standards and guidelines in different areas of facilities. So I wanted to go over a specific type of guideline or standard that we're going to be looking at. And this particular guideline is related to space needed for a specific population size. So this particular source that we're looking at right now are the NIRSA, which stands for the National Intramural Recreational Sports Association, Space Planning Guidelines for Campus Recreational Sports Facilities. And this is one of the sources that you could look at in making your lists of facility audit standards and guidelines. And this particular source deals with guidelines related to the size of the facility compared to the size of the audience it serves. So if we had a campus of 50,000 students, we wouldn't want to have our recreational sport facilities be too small for that. So that's just an example. It specifically looks at campus recreation facilities. We're not looking at pro sports stadiums or YMCAs or anything like that. This is specific to college campuses and the recreational sport facilities they provide for their student body. And the purpose is to make sure that the facilities are big enough and contain enough equipment to meet the demands of their audience. So why is it important to match the size of your facility with how big your student body is? What happens if your facility is too big? Like you see here, it sits empty and it's expensive. You pay for that space. You're paying for that square footage and all of this equipment. So if it's sitting empty and not getting used, then maybe it's a waste of money. You don't want to pay for what isn't used. On the other hand, what if your facility is too small for your student body? Well, as you can see here, there's crowding, there are lines. Students aren't getting to play or exercise, and they don't have time to stand in line. They need to study. So students need to play and exercise because it's healthy and it helps them to be successful in college. So the purpose of the facilities are to let them exercise, play, and be healthy at a time when it's convenient for them. So the first thing that we need to do in thinking about matching our recreational sports facilities to the size of our student body is to look up what the size of our student body is. So this page is the institutional research page of euler.edu, and it gives us the fall 2016 enrollment. So you can see it right there in the middle of your screen. You should see that the fall 2016 head count is 11,665 students. And sure, it does contain a few students that maybe aren't on this campus, like the law school, and some of these students may be online only, but we don't know what those numbers really are. So right now we're just going to use that total fall 2016 head count of 11,665. And now we're going to flip over to look at those NIRSA space planning guidelines and see what it tells us that we need for a school of this size. So this is the chapter out of the NIRSA Space Planning Guidelines for Campus Recreational Sports Facilities that's attached for you in your Blackboard. And like I said before, you're going to use it for this project. So here's the table of contents for the chapter that I've attached for you. And you can see that it has some size guidelines for some different facility types. So for example, it's got some space planning guidelines for indoor facilities. And you can see it's got a table number. There's a table number and a page number. So we can look at indoor facilities. We can also look at fitness facilities. So some of you may have fitness facilities. We have got outdoor facilities like fields and courts. Some of you will be looking at those. And then at Euler's enrollment, when we're looking at 11,000, that's what we're going to be using for our number, we're also going to be looking at the space planning guidelines for large institutions, and that's 10,000 to 20,000 students. So there are some specific guidelines for institutions of our particular size as well. And what we really are going to use for the purpose of this project is this space planning guidelines for large institutions that we're going to find on page 47. So let's go ahead and scroll on down there and see what that looks like. So here it is. Table 7, the space planning guidelines for large institutions, and that covers the size of our institution, which we're going to estimate right around 11,000. So how do we use this table? Here's our instructions right here. So the instructions tell us that when multiplied by the head count enrollment of a college or university expressed in thousands of students, each figure in the table will yield a baseline estimate of the amount of space needed to meet the recreational needs of students, faculty, and staff at that institution. So what we're going to calculate is the amount of space needed to meet the recreational needs of students, faculty, and staff. So let's use something here towards the top that exists in the DSC. And so somebody is going to be using this in their audit. Let's look at basketball courts. So the number of courts recommended in these guidelines per 1,000 students equals 0.45. So these guidelines say that there should be 0.45 basketball courts for every 1,000 students that's enrolled at ULR. Okay, so let's look at this and do the math. So here is our guideline. We looked at this guideline from the other from the PDF, and the guideline was 0.45 basketball courts for every 1,000 students enrolled. And ULR enrollment is 11,000. We saw that back on the website earlier. And expressed in thousands of students, this 11,000 turns into 11. So we take the 11,000 and we're going to divide it by 1,000. So 11,000 students expressed in thousands of students equals 11. So we're going to use that 11 to do our math and interpret this guideline. So we have 11,000 students expressed in thousands of students, and we're going to multiply it by our guideline, by our 0.45 courts for every 1,000 students enrolled. And that gives us 11 times 0.45 gives us 4.95. So since we can't have 4.95 basketball courts, I would just round up, and that means ULR needs 5 basketball courts to serve its enrollment. So that's what the standards tell you that we need at ULR for basketball courts and their recreational facilities. So if you are auditing the DSC and you count the basketball courts, are there 5? Because that's what are recommended. If there are less than 5, then you're going to report that there are not as many that standards recommend. Guidelines recommend 5, and you're going to show how you got those particular numbers. Now we can also do this with a number of other facilities in the DSC, and you will be doing them. For examples, here is pools. This is the number of lanes per 1,000 students. Somebody is going to be doing this particular audit in the assignment. We can look at cardio space, and this is given in square feet. ASF means square footage per 1,000 students. ULR also does have some free weight space in the DSC, a group exercise room, and so you're going to be looking at those. Let's do another example with square footage using this free weight space guideline per 1,000 students of 295 square feet per 1,000 students. So let's write that out. This is what it would look like if you were writing it out. Free weight rooms should have 295 square feet per 1,000 students. So let's do this math. 295 times 11, because this is in per 1,000 students, and that equals 3,245 square feet. So that's what Euler should have for square footage of that free weight room that you find in the DSC. So what you would do is ask the DSC staff, Mr. Morales or Miss Husky, and you're going to ask them how many square feet that room is. And hopefully we can get some of that information. And so we will either say that they are meeting this recommendation, or maybe it's a little too small, or maybe it exceeds that recommendation. So I wanted to go over these particular guidelines with you because they do involve just a little bit of math in order to match space with the enrollment at whichever institution that you're looking at. And so there's a little bit of math involved, and I wanted to show you how to use these guidelines because it's not completely intuitive. So if you are having trouble interpreting or using these guidelines when you create your guidelines for your checklists, please ask me and I will definitely help you learn how to use these. It's like I said, it's not intuitive, but I really want us to be able to use these because these are some valuable guidelines, and this is a great source to use.